And then I hit a groove with some outside advice and some friends that, my home is my home and I am ready to have a home that feels permanent. I love the Upper West Side. I know I want to live in the city. And it feels like it's time to do that. And if the partner comes around, then, that's great. And we'll figure it out then.
But this is my house, Mommy. The one I asked Mr. Springer for. It is, I know it is.
Welcome to The Pursuit of Home, coming to you from New York City. This is real people buying real estate and their unique journey to get there. We share the tips, tricks, and frameworks to help you navigate the bumps in the road that you won't see on reality TV or social media, and which no one has talked about until now. Welcome back to the Pursuit of Home podcast. I'm Scott Harris, your host. Real estate and dating, are they the same? How are they different? Falling in love, getting rejected, the ups and downs, the expectations, and finding your way all around it. How willing are we to share the nitty-gritty of these searches for a home or for a partner? Today, I speak with a buyer who is deciding not only to buy a home in New York, but to look for love at the same time. She opens up about her experience, not just the good stuff, but everything. How is a home search different by yourself than looking when you're already with someone? When do your artificial timelines get in the way? How do you just have fun and stop worrying about how it's all going to work out? How do you create a list of priorities and then throw it all out the window when you realize that it's not helping? Do people act differently around their real estate than their search for love? I think you'll find their advice incredibly helpful on today's episode of The Pursuit of Home.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Today on the podcast, I have with me an anonymous buyer that we're going to call Allison. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I want to start, if you can imagine, you hop on social media, you see somebody make the post, it's been perfectly manicured and sanitized and exactly what someone wants. It's the highlight reel. I want to start with the highlight reel, when it all worked out. Can you paint me that picture for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I would probably post two pictures if I could. I think one would be me and my husband and our two kids. We have almost 3-year-old and almost 10-year-old, an almost 10-year-old boy and almost 3-year-old girl, and we'd be sitting in our den on a cozy couch, maybe, and you would see our TV setup. And then I think the second picture would be us around our living room, our dining room table, sharing snacks or food and have a board game out. That would be my two highlight reel pictures.
Okay, I love it. And so now let's go behind the scenes.
Yes.
And really talk about the journey a little bit more. Had been, as far as your buying journey goes, you'd been divorced a few years earlier and decided to buy. You just decided to buy. How did you think about the timing of that? Was it safe? I guess as I'm thinking about it, you were at the time you were even single, you're looking to buy. How did you even put that together?
Yeah. And it's a really good question, especially because I think I was in a place that of what others might think of as uncertainty. So I should say that I at the time when I was already thinking of buying, I'd already lived on the Upper West Side for 10 years and probably rented in, 4 or 5 different apartments. But in my case, I was in my mid-30s and I had a 4-year-old, right? And so I certainly wanted to, or envisioned a life in which I got repartnered. And for some part of time, I was thinking, oh, well, I shouldn't make any big decisions until I repartner. And then I hit a groove with some outside advice and some friends that, my home is my home and I am ready to have a home that feels permanent. I love the Upper West Side. I know I want to live in the city. And it feels like it's time to do that. And if the partner comes around, then, that's great. And we'll figure it out then.
And for anybody listening out there who doesn't know what the Upper West Side is, that's the Upper West Side of Manhattan, New York City. And so the stakes, needless to say, you're going out doing this on your own, and the stakes are pretty high. This is not the least expensive real estate market in the country. And you go out, you're looking at apartments. And what happened with the first apartment that you bid on?
Oh, well, I mean, I have a great story in this regard. So I bid on an apartment, and I was on a flight landing in New Orleans. I get together with my college girlfriends every year. And I remember, Scott, you called me and you said your bid was accepted. And I was like, oh, wow, that's great. And so, that was an exciting thing to celebrate with my girlfriends that weekend. I had an accepted bid. So I can keep going if you'd like.
Yeah, please keep going, because it wasn't the it veers off the social media posts from here.
Yeah. So then, a couple of weeks went by and you kept saying, we're not getting a contract. I don't know what's going on. Let's see what's going on. And I, of course, was new to this whole process. So I really, whatever you said in terms of timing worked. And then finally, I don't remember exactly when you got back to me, but apparently the seller had gotten another bid and went with that, which I understand from you. And also as someone whose career depends a lot on relationship management, that's a really bad decision. It doesn't, maybe for the seller, it's okay, but it's really a rough thing for the agents. And so it was a kind of back to the drawing board situation for us. And so then yet again, I went looking for an apartment, and I put a bid on another apartment around the corner, actually, negotiated a contract, put down a deposit, did a ton of diligence.
Signed a contract too.
Signed a contract, yeah, negotiated and then signed a contract and sent over a deposit, only for the board to ultimately have rejected my application.
So let's pause there for 1 second and just note for someone who's buying a house outside of New York City, the offer and the contract are almost one and the same, as opposed to here where you have to. So the first deal that you didn't even really put a deal together, the contract there was no agreement, no handshake, even, well, kind of a handshake, but almost nothing. And then this one, it got all the way past the signed contract. You filled out the whole application to buy the apartment, and you submitted it to the building's board, and then they rejected you.
They rejected me, which I remember where I was as well, Scott, when I found out that news from you. I was walking on the Upper West Side, and it was cool out, meaning it was fall time. And I remember being stunned when you initially told me the news, like kind of like that punched in the gut feeling. And it's funny that I remember that so distinctly, because now I feel like I dodged a huge bullet, because I really ended up in the right apartment, which we can also circle back to at the end because it has its own irony. But I was totally stunned, and I remember the sellers were totally stunned.
Did you think about giving up? I mean, you had 2 deals that went south, and I think for anybody in the suburbs who's been bidding on 1,000 different houses and losing all of them, they might laugh and say, giving up after 2 lost deals, what are you, crazy? Right. But you had a signed contract. It seemed like this was already going to happen. Did you? No,
I didn't think about giving up. And this can, get to something I think about a lot in general regarding homes and just major life decisions. I mean, we construct timeframes for ourselves and like narratives for ourselves about how it should be. And if they line up, I think we take that as proof that we were right all along in constructing those timeframes and narratives. And when they don't line up, we're not necessarily, we're not always sure how to manage it. So it didn't occur to me to give up. It did mean that you and I needed to go back to the drawing board and talk through it's a big deal to be rejected. And so what did I need to do to make the application look stronger? Of course, I was at the time a divorced parent, and there was concern that there might be some issues there from the perspective of the board. And so how to make sure my profile was strong was something that was on my mind, which I think for other folks who might be looking to buy in the city, that's something people think about.
Yeah, I want to make sure that people hear that we're talking about a situation where you were concerned that you got rejected by essentially it's like a country club inside of a building because maybe you were a single mom, which has its own, I mean, let's have a little moment there to go, wow, that really stinks.
Yeah.
And all along meanwhile you're a single mom and you have a great job and all the other things that you need to do to be in the city, in New York City and work it out. But you're also dating and looking for love at the same time.
Right.
So and having some faith that that's all going to work out too. So how did each search work together? I mean, was the dating part, looking to repartner, did that help with the home search? Did you find them as completely separate, or were they connected?
I think this gets back to what I was saying earlier about perhaps they were too connected in my head initially. And that's what I meant by like people create constructs for ourselves, right? We're going to get married. And then if this is what you want, we're going to have kids, and that's going to be very easy. And like we can put a pause for folks for whom that's not a very easy thing. And then,
Sure.
we're going to buy a home, or maybe we're going to buy a home and then have kids, but it's going to go in this like very neat order. And again, like to reiterate this point is for me, I realized that granted, I was already divorced and had the kids. So that didn't go in a neat order, but I didn't need it to go in this neat order again. I was comfortable establishing myself with a home that would feel like mine, and how the dating lined up would be a secondary. It wasn't that they were independent conditions, to use a logic statement.
Okay. And I think to put it another way, maybe tell me if you agree with this. You just weren't overthinking this process at all. You were like, it's going to work out. I don't know how. I just know I have some faith that it's going to work out however it's supposed to work out. Is that kind of the attitude?
With the home, certainly.
Yeah.
I think that in tight markets, and Scott, this is your expertise, not mine, though I read the news. It seems like we've been in a seller's market for quite a long time in many areas. If you feel entitled or feel like there is a specific window in which you are entitled to a certain home with certain criteria, I think you are going to be disappointed. And I think the best, it is really important to be open, but we can circle back to that.
You're in a space for a short period of time. It's competitive, like you said. So you have this gut check as you go into these apartments. I mean, you either love it or you don't. Is that good? Is it bad? Were you okay with that, where you had to kind of make a decision pretty quickly? Is it the same as when you meet someone and you're like, I either like them or I don't. I don't have to intellectualize it one bit. I mean, people do that all the time. They're like, I just don't feel it for this person. Why do people get hung up when they buy real estate? It has to be so much more intellectual.
Well, I like how you pose it. And I think that in the real estate context, it's really kind of a cluster F. I don't know what your censorship rules are, but for most of us, myself included, you're making a massive purchase. It's the most money you've ever spent on anything. And you're probably, again, in my case, taking out a massive loan. And at the same time, like you were alluding to, Scott, you have about 25 minutes, right? You do a walkthrough and you're supposed to fantasize a life here. And then at the same time, you don't know if it will actually be the life you've just fantasized on. And so I think for me personally, like I knew based on my lifestyle and my priorities, certain things that were really important to me in an apartment and things that were less important to me. And so it was actually very easy for me to figure that out. I think that for someone who goes into this expecting an enormous deliberation process, they're going to, or having the luxury of enormous deliberation and have some things that really matter to them that they prioritized, it's going to be really challenging. To use your dating analogy, Scott, a thing that I started doing in dating is I refused to go out with someone unless and until we spoke on the phone first. And my reason being was that within 10 minutes, I had found in my life that I could really figure out with 90% of people if I wanted to continue the conversation or not. And it was much easier to not continue the conversation over the phone than it would be if we had been out. And so I agree with you. I think that you can get to a point in your life when you know certain things about yourself that are really important and you have faith in those things. And so whether it's dating or it's perhaps making quick decisions on an apartment, I think in both cases, it's really about figuring out some priorities and what resonates.
Okay. Last question.
Yes.
And then we want to circle back and, share the big, whatever the excitement that you wanted to share. But what advice would you give to home buyers who are struggling with the same issues? What's the advice you'd give buyers? Is it similar? Is it exactly what you're saying? Figure out what one or two or three things is most important, and if it resonates, go for it. Or are there something else that you want to?
That's exactly it. I think you need to, and I mean specific. Like, for example, for me, I host family meals and holiday meals, and so a big dining area and a lot of kitchen storage really mattered to me. By contrast, I ended up very lucky to have a washer dryer, but it would have been something I could be more flexible on as long as it was in my building. And I hear folks who sometimes they have this wish list of 10 things that are non-negotiable. And Scott, you tell me, but in my opinion, unless your budget is infinite, whether it's a home or an apartment, you're not going to get those 10 things at once. You might get to build them out or renovate or what have you. But I think those top 3 things need to be really not just priorities, but also need to be resonant with how you live your life, right? What are the things in your life that you value? For me, I really value family meals and holiday meals all together.
So it's like you have to know your why underneath. Like, why is this thing important to me? And get really crystal clear on that, and then let that drive you. Because ultimately, if you know, okay, this thing is super important to me, then it may show up in a slightly different way than you expect, but then it still lands in that way.
I love how you put that.
And also, I just want to point out that here we are in New York. And of course, we're not going to talk about how much whatever your budget was, but people come to New York and they can spend millions and millions of dollars. And yet you're still on that little tiny checklist that's important to you. Having a place to do your own laundry somehow makes it there, and that's not always guaranteed.
Yeah. And I think the why is exactly right, is how do you envision actualizing your 2 or 3 most important whys? So the thing I wanted to come back to, because I know we got to close up, is so I made my first apartment offer that I talked about, where that was accepted, but then the seller went on, was in the same apartment building that I currently live in. And not only was it in the same apartment building, so I ended up in the same building, I ended up in the same line. So my first offer that was accepted was a B line. I am now in a B line. And for a host of reasons, I think that the apartment I ended up with is the one that was really right for me. So that is really irony. I made 3 offers within 1 block of each other, 2 of which were in the same building, and that is where I ended up.
Well, I'm so happy to get to spend some time talking to you, and thank you for opening your story to everyone. I know people get a lot of value from listening to this.
Thank you, Scott. This is wonderful. I really appreciate you reaching out.
You're very welcome. Talk to you soon. So in today's meeting with this buyer, we're standing at the crossroads of Love Street and House Street, I guess. And so after the break, to unpack everything we were talking about, I am bringing on to the show Michelle Frankel, who is a matchmaker. We're going to talk really about this intersection and how similar they are. And I guess we'll also find out just how different they are too, right after the break.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place. The More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
Okay. And then we'll come back. All right. 1 second. Let me just click here. All right. All right, we're back. And today with us on the podcast is Michelle Frankel. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Michelle is a professional matchmaker. She's a dating coach and a strategic dating consultant, which sounds so serious for something which we're going to talk about, which I think shouldn't be taken nearly this seriously. But one of the things that stood out for me, Michelle, is that you said you were responsible for over 10,000 date introductions.
Yeah.
And that sort of blew me away. I wonder what that actually looks like. But not only are you helping people, but you're helping this broader audience of people through CBS, CNN, Yahoo. You're on Netflix, on the Unorthodox Life show. So, and not on Today's Show, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really excited to have you here. Thanks for being here. I have a few questions for you. So bear with me and we're going to start right now. All right. So our buyer, she got this advice. She said she had advice that her home is her home, whether she found someone new romantically in her life or not. It seems like good advice for dating, not just for house hunting, because people, I think, have to stop worrying about finding the house, right? How do you get people to relax and prepare for the journey for dating?
That is a really great question. And, having listened to the podcast, I loved the fact that she said, you know what? It's time. I am buying my house, making it a home, and she's living in the moment, which is fantastic. The only guidance that I would share is that you should absolutely be independent, live in the now, but create space for future opportunities, for if a future partner was to come. So you never want to have one night stand or no room for someone to move in, right? You want to kind of will the opportunity to happen. And the fact is, this home she bought, it's not her last home. It's probably not her permanent home. If she meets someone and she develops a life with them, they can always buy a second house or what have you, right? So living in the now is great. Now, to answer your specific question, how do you get people to relax and not worry about it? That's the $1 million question, because when someone wants something so much, it is so hard to let go of that worrying or that obsessing. But what people have to realize is so much is out of their control. All they can control are their actions or how they present themselves in the process, whether it's buying a house or dating. But 50% of that equation is out of their hands, whether it's the board of directors of a co-op approving you or not, or whether it's somebody else who is ready to be in a committed relationship. There is so much out of your control.
That actually is a perfect segue, Michelle, into really this buyer's story, because she had some travails, right? She had some real bumps in the road. And I'm quite sure that your clients have the same moments when things go south, and the reasons aren't rational, right? The reasons just, somebody decided they can't explain it, or they meet somebody that's maybe they think is a better fit and the relationship falls apart. How do you help clients deal with that? Because I imagine it's hard enough, like you said, to relax, be in the moment, and then all of a sudden things are, life is happening, I guess is the thing, right?
Right. I so wish you could deliver something with a ribbon all tied up neatly, but that's not life, right? Life is messy and things happen no matter what. There is no guarantees. There's no perfections. I always tell people there's no unicorns. People like, what do you do? I'm a unicorn catcher. It's just not, that's not reality. There's always going to be false starts. There's always going to be bumps in the road, and things aren't going to go how you expect them to be. And again, 50% of the equation. So often, for example, Scott, after a date, people come back and give us feedback. And our client can really be into the date and want a second date. And the other person on the other end ranks it a 10. Can't get any better than that, but they don't want to go on a second date. And it blows our mind. Why not? They're like, I just know it's not my future. And it's that instant feel. Now, do we challenge them? Do we encourage them to check it out again? Because often that first impression could be wrong. But for many people, they're like, I know myself. It's not my future. No second date.
You know, I want to get into this idea of a timeline, because I think, you know, I remember way back when I was dating, it was like you kind of have these peaks and valleys. Like you're sort of emotionally ready for love, and then you break up with someone and you're not anymore. And in real estate, you know, it's the timing may be off as well, right? Yep. And so I think people do have this idea that it has to happen within a certain frame of time. So, and when you're buying a house, you're like, well, we want to get it done before a school year, or, you know, there's some practical reason perhaps. But in love, you know, what's the rush per se, you know, necessarily, like maybe the biological clock is ticking, whatever they say, but how do you help people get off of that? Because it is a real, I think that's you're setting yourself up for failure. Don't you think?
Absolutely. But I would say that success of relationships does come down to timing. 70% of it, probably. If someone's not in the right mindset, they may not be able to overcome whatever is bogging them down. That being said, the counterpart is if a great opportunity comes your way and everything else is in a line, why would you not explore that situation? Right? You don't have to. I think people freak themselves out a lot of the times. They're like 10 miles down the road, and all it is a date. It's meeting someone, spending time, getting to know. It's not engagement. It's not commitment for life. It's not marriage. You're spending time and being in the now. So yes, I do think actually timing plays a vital part, but I don't think it has to be the end all be all of determining whether a relationship will work.
People sometimes, does this happen in dating in your world where somebody meets, you know, this couple meets, these two people meet, they're not a couple yet, and then the timing seems off, yep. Right? Like it just, for whatever reason, and then they, all of a sudden later on, someone, like it occurs to them, or something hits them where they say, you know, the timing is better. I mean, you read about these stories in the New York Times in the wedding section, yeah, where people say, well, we dated, then we broke up, and then a year later it made more sense. Does that happen a lot in your world? Because it happens in real estate.
It does.
People come back to the property, yeah, and they're like, they're just ready then. Yeah. And if it happens to be on the market, you know, it works out, or it comes back on the market, which sounds very much like I was dating somebody, then I broke up. So does that happen to you?
It does happen once in a while. And if they broke up purely for timing reasons, then that's second.
What would the timing reason even be?
You know, it could be that one of them has a relative that is ill, and there's a lot of responsibility or stuff on their shoulders. It could be, this is the year at work, they're up for partnership and they have to give it 100%. It could be that they just broke an engagement, and although they really like the person, they really haven't healed from that first situation, and they jump too quickly into the second, and they need to figure out like what didn't work, and they haven't done enough processing. So these are different, you know, random scenarios that can happen. However, if two people get together and they date for a while, and someone's using the excuse, it's bad timing, but it's really value-based, or the emotion of connection isn't there, then when they meet again, it's not going to work.
Of course. And I got to imagine that this happens very rarely in your world, because if it's not like, what I'm thinking about is like the fairy tale, because in real estate, right, you know, it's, people sometimes watch TV and they think, oh, it's going to happen overnight, or in 30 minutes, they're going to find the apartment. for them. And if people are coming to you, I guess odds are they've had maybe a tough go here and there, and they're like trying to figure it out. Is that fair to say?
That, or they want to outsource it. They're just too busy and they're like, you know what? I'll cut through the noise. This is what I'm looking for. Outsource it to you, the professionals.
Right. I mean, it's a very CEO move in real estate. Like, look, just send me the best things. I'm too busy. Right.
Exactly.
Do people come in expecting, even though they've realized, okay, I can't do this on my own. This isn't always so easy. I don't want to go to bars. I don't want to, waste my time. Do they still come in with this expectation that it can be like a fairy tale, or no?
I think they have their list, right? And they think we're pizza makers or Amazon shopping, or they want this perfection in their mind. And a few things we tell them is, if this was so easy, you wouldn't be coming to us. If it existed, you could find it on your own, right? And it either doesn't exist, or you're looking for something, and I always try to remind our clients and different people who are looking, you're only 50% of the equation. So yeah, we could show you everything you're looking for in a mate, but that mate has to want you as well, right? It has to be a mutual fit. So yes, Disney has really done a disservice to our clients and to the singles at large, because I always tell women, Richard Gere is not driving up in a Lotus, and you may not be that old profession anyway.
For people, who are listening who may not get the reference, we're talking about Pretty Woman, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I guess there is a fair amount of overthinking. When you talk about a checklist where people are I want to have this. How often do people have the checklist, and then in your world, that they have the checklist and then they finally realize, like, the person that they hit it off with has really almost nothing on that checklist? Does that happen to you?
It does happen, but it happens almost a little later down in the process of working together or in their journey, right? Because they come to the table with, I am X, Y, and Z, and I therefore want X, Y, and Z. And the problem is, just because they're X, Y, and Z doesn't make X, Y, and Z a good counterbalance for them. So what we do is we'll listen to our clients clearly. They give us the directives. They tell us their criteria. We may challenge them, and we introduce them to those type of people. Now, when it doesn't work out time and time again, we're like, okay, this is the definition of insanity, right? So we need to refocus and find, your end goal is to be in a relationship. If the person you're going after isn't the right person, it's not getting you there, let's refocus and figure out what will get you there.
I want to pause and just, if whoever's listening out there, it's almost the exact same process. It's a different vehicle, but it's the exact same thing as finding a home. But it's like everything you're saying, I'm like, yep. And where I want to go and try to bring this home even more is, you've been doing this for a long time. You've made 10,000 introductions. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking I can't even imagine how many homes I've shown. When does your intuition come into play, where you meet this person and you're thinking about this client of yours and you're like, I don't know why, but I'm just having this moment where I think they'd be a good match. Does that happen for you?
It does. Not all the time, but very early on when I started about 12 plus years ago, one of my favorite couples came to me independently, and the gentleman had hired me and I was recruiting for him. And this woman came to my office and she was very much probably going to hire us. And I said, don't hire us just yet. I know your husband. Let me introduce you to one person. And if it doesn't work out, at least you know the process, and we'll take it from there. And that's all it took, that one person. So that's not the case for all our clients.
That's right. It's just like homes. The chances of people, right.
Going back to what we've been speaking about, Scott, what's interesting with this specific couple, he wanted to date younger. She wanted to date taller. They didn't have each other's criteria and checklists, and I said, take it for what it is. Go on a date, be in the moment, and see how you feel. Forget about the resume, forget about the checklist, see how you feel. And the second date and the third date, 2 months later, they were, good to go.
Off to the races.
Yeah.
All right. If there's any one piece of advice we haven't covered here that you think would be helpful to our audience when it comes to falling in love, maybe with a home,
Right.
what would you give?
I think two things come to mind. One is the paradox of choice, right? I think often when there is too much out there, or you look at too many choices, and I bet you can relate to this, Scott, it becomes more confusing than not. And you almost have to start all over from the beginning because you've seen so much, you can't even keep it straight or figure out what it is that you really want. So I tell people, be in the moment, look at what is right in front of you, and independently figure out how you feel about that or that person, that place. Second of all, be open. You may think in real estate or in dating that you want X, Y, and Z, and really ask the whys, because you may come up with why.
You mean why is this important to me?
Why is it important to you? Exactly.
Yeah.
And that why might be able to be addressed with something outside of your home or dating. It could be accomplished in another way. And it's no longer that required why that you place such a high importance on. And therefore, it opens up the field, whether it's in real estate or in dating. And it gives you more options that you wouldn't have otherwise considered. So I think it's really important to ask those questions. Why is XYZ so important to me? And really unpeel the layers, because it might not be as important as you once thought.
That's a great place to stop. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we'll keep you, we'll bring you in when things go really wrong for somebody and you can come help save the day.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
That's our show for today. Thanks to our guests and experts for being here. If you like the podcast, we're produced by and part of the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Check out all the amazing podcasts on the network talking about the New York City real estate market and beyond. If you found this episode helpful, rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Push that follow button on YouTube, share it with your friends, and check out how to recommend guests or apply to be on the show. You can discover other ways to pursue your home right there in the show notes. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place, the More Network. With more than 20 webcast series and podcasts, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access top global real estate experts. Learn more about and subscribe to our YouTube and Apple podcasts by visiting getmorenetwork.com.